Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the Institute of Applied Theology. And we're fortunate to have with us the director of the Institute, Swami Krishnapada. And Swami Krishnapada, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
We're very happy to be here.
And to say, first of all, I'm sure that I sort of garbled that title. It's the Institute for Applied Theology, is it not?
Applied spiritual
Applied spiritual theology, and of course we're simply delighted to have you here. But let's open this show before talking about the Institute itself and your position as the director of the Institute. Let's open the show by talking about you, and to have you to give our audience some information about your background, your education, and to explain exactly who you are and in a real sense what you represent in terms of religion. Because I think when we introduce you as Swami Krishnapada, a lot of folks might not have a fairly good idea of what a Swami or who a Swami is and the discipline and things that are necessary to elevate you to that particular level. So let's talk about that transformation that you made as an African American coming from Cleveland, Ohio, to be at this exalted position today as the Swami. Let's do it from that perspective.
Sure. Dr. Henny, I sort of wear three hats. From a Western perspective, I'm a scholar of international law and a psychotherapist. And I graduated from Princeton and a few other schools, Princeton University. From a African perspective, I'm an African high chief. Particularly, I was ordained about 6 years ago in Warri, Nigeria. And I oversee about 1.5 million people and what have you. Along with that, I have many, many monasteries all over the world. I have 20 monasteries just in Ghana and Nigeria alone. And so in those monasteries, we are connected with counseling services. We have farms, cottage industries. So the idea is sort of focusing on a life of spirituality and simplicity. As an African chief, I'm a consultant to many of the African leaders. I've been a consultant for maybe in the last 9 years or so to some heads of states in different countries. Several years back, I was working in connection with the United Nations, International Labor Organization, as a consultant in stress management, time management, and conflict resolution. Also here in America, various celebrities often call for my particular help. Now, from a Eastern perspective, I'm the only what's called Vaishnav guru, black Vaishnav guru in the world.
I would imagine.
So that allows me to involve myself in many world peace organizations. Particularly that's an Eastern perspective, so it's kind of dealing with the Vedic tradition, or what would be called sort of the Hindu family. So there's the Western, African, and Eastern side. Now, how I got involved in such? Well, all my life I've been a social reformer, a revolutionist. And at some point I began to realize that real change that was needed in the world could not be implemented just based on external transformations. There was a need for internal processing, internal growth. So my last year at Princeton, my dissertation was on Western psychology and Eastern philosophy. And my particular hands-on research dealt with what's called regression research, where psychiatrists and psychotherapists regress the patients sometimes to understand their problems. They're dealing with neurosis and psychosis problems. From that study, I became so convinced that there was so much more to the human condition than what Western scholarship offered. And I began to make that kind of investigation, looking more at the Afro-Asiatic cosmologies. And so that brought me into meditation and fasting and deep prayer and celibacy. I'm also a celibate monk. I've been celibate for about 28 years. And it's a way to selflessly try to, try to serve humanity. So since that time, I've been involved in many, many places in the world. About every week or so, I'm traveling to a different country. I coordinate many interfaith gatherings because my training is in Christianity, is in Islam, it's in Buddhism, as well as Indian and Vedic studies. And particularly I emphasize, as we look at the problems the world is facing now, of racism, tribalism, rise in crime and drug abuse, and even rise in religious fanaticism. These problems are fragmenting the world more than any other problems. So I try to play my little role in healing the planet, healing the community.
In other words, you take sort of a world view in terms of all of these issues, believing that many of these issues are interrelated. Would that be a correct assessment in terms of?
Exactly. See, the problems that we're now facing are really far beyond just addressing with material solutions. And they're problems that go beyond gender, they go beyond race, they go beyond tribe. They are inherent problems that need to be addressed. And as we look at the universals and at the inherent needs, we see that really there's one race, there's a human race, and there's really one religion. That's the religion of love and service to God. And there's one sense, there's one language, and that's the language of the heart.
And so all of those together, and so when you are called upon by world leaders like Nelson Mandela, and as I say, I raise these questions simply because I don't know the answer, and we would certainly like. What do you tell them? I mean, how do they go about bringing you into their service, and give us that kind of. And we're going to have a short commercial break in a minute, but we'll take that break and then we'll get back to it. But let's start us off by talking about, say, your relationship with the President of South Africa and how that relationship evolved and the impact that you think that you have had on that relationship and that relationship has had on you.
Sure. With many of the presidents that I have met and assist in various ways, we tune into nation building from more of a human and spiritual perspective. We examine things about how to deal with crime. We look at areas of resource depletion. And we look particularly at applying appropriate technologies that will help the present and guarantee a very viable future.
Applied spiritual technology, is that what we're saying here? Is that essentially that?
That's right.
And so they call you into their service, and those are the basic areas that you talk about.
And then according to the immediate problems. Just like, for instance, one of the earlier conversations I had with President Nelson Mandela in one of our first meetings. We've met many times since then. I was mentioning I had just come from a conference in West Africa, in Togo. It was a conference on corruption. At that particular conference, it was mentioned that African heads of states have remitted over $20 billion to their foreign bank accounts in the West. So I was tuning in the fact that so much of leadership in Africa and many places in the world has been leadership that's been exploitive and manipulative. And that it's very important that a person like him shows other leaders in Africa as well as in other parts of the world that a leader can remain principle-centered, a leader can have integrity and maintain high standards of ethics and morality. And that most important is that a leader should be a good example and role model for others.
And so, so we're saying that in a real sense, the suggestions that you're making are only one of the many trains of thought in terms of leadership and et cetera that these leaders are bombarded with. And unless they can hear the statements that you're making dealing with applied spiritual technology and that kind of thing and how to apply it and how to bring those things about, then you are in a real sense absent from the table. Is that, I mean, that point of view is absent
it would
from
seem
the table.
so. See, I write many books, and some of my books are on leadership. My last two books, the leadership book, is being printed in 6 different languages. And it's like a manual of how one can imbibe higher ethics and spirituality, but in a sense that's not sectarian, but allows a person to have better character, to be able to exhilarate and inspire one's citizens or constituents, and to formulate policies that will be for the better good of the greatest number of people.
Very good. Let us take this first commercial break, and we'll be back.